Trump having significantly more information than we have, and here we can only say maybe he thought or maybe. But today, already looking back, there is an impression that he probably thought that Canada, well, let's say, could be split apart. And if it can be split apart, then why not get some, let's say, big piece of something out of it? Whether that's right, moral, or immoral, that's not what we're talking about right now. And from my point of view, I actually think that it would be very good for both the United States and Canada. Somehow organize some kind of common trade and economic space, whatever it may be. But in that case, the border of our union should not run along the borders of countries, but along the borders of the union. And here's the problem, because who will control these borders? What does it mean to control the border? It means that if we impose some tariffs together, it doesn't mean that goods are brought into America with tariffs, but into Canada without any. And then from Canada, since we share a common space, they bring goods into the United States. Why is this beneficial? Because, first of all, joint defense, Greenland, Canada, Alaska, the United States of America, would form a very powerful union that would be easy to defend. Next, along Greenland, there are quite a few routes like around Alaska, around Greenland, and so on, that open up when the ice melts a little. As you probably know, every couple of thousand years we experience slight climate changes, and sometimes the ice melts, while at other times the ice increases. Right now we're in a period when the ice is melting, and that's why there will be more ships, submarines, and all sorts of things coming from there. From the far northern outskirts in Greenland. We would like to control all of this, because from both a trade and a military defensive point of view, it's better to control it. Therefore, from many points of view, a union between Canada and the United States would be a very serious, so to speak, right move. And Trump understood this, and he was moving in that direction, trying to push it. But of course, unless the Canadians decide that it's good for them too, it's impossible to make it happen.
Look, here's the situation. Many people I know, my circle, of course, I won't refer to any one person, but the people I know, a large number of people. When all this started, well, of course, Canadian pride and, so to speak, other emotions that overwhelmed people, they said, no, we don't want to be the 51st state. We're the 55th or 92nd. What happened next? From my point of view, my incorrect point of view, when we had elections, the Conservatives were ahead and we were really hoping for change. And at that time, the American president got into a discussion with Trudeau about tariffs. This kind of fuss started, and Canadians got scared that they would become the 51st state. And Carney was telling us how much of a Canadian patriot he was. They rushed from the Conservatives to the Liberals, and we got Carney, but we didn't get what we expected. And today, many will say that Trump is to blame for Carney becoming the Prime Minister and Minister of Canada. I think it won't last long, but some people say, no, it's our own fault. It doesn't matter who's to blame now. No use crying over spilled milk. This is what I think. If you ask me, if I were American, I would still vote for Trump. No matter what's happening now, I've already been told one thing in the morning, another in the afternoon, and something else in the evening. Let Americans worry about that. After all, it's their president, your president. As for us, well, we would like one for ourselves too. I'm speaking for myself. Someone like Trump says one thing in the morning, another in the afternoon, and does something else in the evening. I don't know why he behaves that way. I think he knows why he acts like that and not differently. Why does he show his unpredictability and is so unpredictable? Maybe it's for us. Maybe it just seems that way to us. Maybe you see it completely differently. But still, I think this situation has harmed Canada to some extent. And I want to say again, I'm not blaming Trump for this being his fault. But it all started rolling with his initiative back then, and it was quite serious. You probably don't agree with me.
Well, I'm not Canadian and I can't speak from Canada's point of view naturally, so Canadian emotions don't really affect me. Trump is brutal. I think that's a word in Russian, or at least it's understandable. He's brutal because he's a genius. Of course, I can easily prove it. I will definitely do it because I don't like statements like idiot. On the contrary, he's a genius. Without it being backed up by any substance, yes. So, Trump, I'll prove it now, as I said, is a genius. And one of the signs of his genius is that he incredibly quickly and intuitively finds the most painful, or so to speak, the exact spot to hit. He finds his own lever so that with this lever somehow, give me a long enough lever, as Archimedes said, and I will, so to speak, move the earth. Well, he's right, so to speak, yes. We know. He already showed us how it's done. So Trump is doing this absolutely brilliantly. First of all, he immediately finds all the sensitive spots and understands the reasons, and then he finds ways to either fix it or, on the contrary, stir things up and make it hurt. It's quite possible that if a conservative came to power now, Canada would temporarily move in the right direction. It's quite possible. And everyone would be, as they say, satisfied, and then, once they were satisfied, next time they would vote again for leveling things out. And it would roll in the same direction, just like what happened with our brilliant President Ronald Reagan. Yes, he left and everything quickly returned to how it was, then got even worse. So what does that mean? Let me give you the following example. The fact is, when Trump was not allowed, not elected, we don't know for sure. Yes, for the second term, we all saw it as a terrible tragedy, so to speak. Yes, we were deceived. And now it's just 4 years, and I think that God did this for us on purpose, so that Trump during these 4 years would pause, look back, toughen up, receive a serious share of hatred, and besides that, start gathering his team and building his program. There are 25 people there, or call it whatever you want. And now that he has come for the 47th term, we have a completely different President Tahiti. He knows how to get things done, he has people who will do it, and so on. That is, what Bolshevik Zingler wrote is brilliant. So, since it's a story, every event he described that seemed bad at first turned out to be amazingly good, and the ones that seemed good at first turned out otherwise. Horrifying. A brilliant story. Bolshevik Zingler is a brilliant writer. In my view, Trump and Canada are the same story. Maybe that's what Trump did, and it's not his fault. He's guilty, he just threw out the idea. Then the Canadians picked it up, and emotionally the left managed to stir up the emotions of Canadians in such a way that they voted against their own interests. That's 100% against themselves. What can you do? I don't know if Trump is to blame. I feel like you already want to say something.
So I understood about Canada, Leon, but here's what I want to ask you. You just said that Trump is a genius, Canada, and that he finds ways, Canada. I have a question for you, the one that just got cut off in the chat, Canada. Then why, if he's a genius and he finds ways, hasn't he found a way yet?
To solve the Ukraine-Russia issue? Well, he hasn't found a way, and the Israel issue, and so to speak, the surrounding world as well. He hasn't solved those either. Let's look at it differently. When people talk about Trump having as many as 6 bankruptcies, and when that's all they say, it feels like he's a complete loser, like he went bankrupt 6 times. But when you start looking into the facts, you find out that he started 1,009 businesses and only 6 of them went bankrupt. You think, wow, what a genius. I wish I could do that too, since that ratio is incredible. So when we focus on something and ignore everything else, that's when we end up saying, oh my God, what a genius he is. He can't, for example, make peace between Russia and Ukraine. I apologize, I just need to continue here for literally 2 more minutes. And I want to remind you that India and Pakistan stopped shooting at each other, that Thailand and Cambodia made peace, and that Azerbaijan and Armenia came together. They signed an agreement that for 30 years they couldn't sign because no one could find a way to regulate it. At the moment when, well, Trump looked at Africa and found out that Congo is there, he got interested because there are metals there, rare earth metals in large quantities that he wants. Yes, but what's happening there? 6 million people have been killed between Congo and its neighbors. So Trump looked at this part of the world, called in 5 leaders from the African continent, and sat them down at his table. He sat on one side while they were on the other. And he said to them, guys, you all need to make peace. And literally within 2 or 3 days, the Americans signed an agreement between all these countries that they wouldn't attack each other and so on. This was achieved without sending out cruisers or moving the Sixth Fleet. That is, Trump simply explained to them what he would do if they continued to kill each other, on the one hand. And on the other hand, what will happen to them? What good things will happen if they stop killing each other and start making money with the United States of America? Then they realized making money was better than fighting. Well, that's amazing, yeah. So, I mean, when he should be given 5 Nobel Peace Prizes for the Abraham Accords, well, you have to come up with something like that. It was really something. To take and unite 1.2 billion Sunnis with Israel, he didn't serve a second term. That was cut short for him. Now he's starting to build it a little differently. But the man who went on a trip to 3 Sunni countries and brought back how much? Definitely $4 trillion in deposits to the United States. A man who found a way to return manufacturing to the United States. Things, however, didn't work out with Russia. Both sides, I emphasize, went their separate ways for some reason. I don't mean the people. The people never make any decisions, never take part in anything, and so on. I mean specifically the people who are currently in power. It's not necessarily that they're sitting in some fancy chair lit up by lights. Sometimes these people are in the shadows. But usually certain groups are in control, except for an absolute tyrant, but even then they have some generals and a guard. Usually certain groups run the country. These 2 groups, both in Ukraine and in Russia, don't want the war to end, each for their own reasons. Saying Trump couldn't convince them, well, they just don't want to and are resisting. The only person in the world who wants to stop the bloodshed there. Just don't tell them that the Europeans want it. They're just like Biden, who encouraged Ukraine. Now they're doing the same. You keep fighting to the last soldier. Yes, let everyone die. But we won't give up a single inch of land and so on. I don't know, if my son or my grandson were fighting there, I would give up 1.25 meters, even 3 meters of land, just so he could come back home. Personally, I would. Even though I was at war, I was shot at. And today I would go just the same as I did back then. Because that was a situation where if we couldn't defend our country, all 6 million people behind me would have been wiped out. But Ukraine is not in that situation. No one is planning to wipe anyone out, so let Ukraine decide for itself. I'm just saying that if it's not with Trump, again, it didn't work out. This is total resistance from both sides, not just one, as Trump believed. Peace, then part ways.
Dan, thank you. I have a question for you. I'm really curious right now. Recently, we had Mikhail Ilyich Filler here, whom you know well and actually introduced me to, so thank you for that. And when Filler was here, he talked about how many people started conversations about Alaska, and Russia was shouting that it was a victory for Russian diplomacy, how everything was so great in Alaska. Well, did Putin outsmart everyone? I'm just telling you what they're writing. And at the same time, Mikhail Vili was telling us that those who say all this are idiots. Well, in his manner, the way he talks, they're complete idiots. You shouldn't listen to them at all. And then Mikhail Ilyich said, do you even understand what was happening there? If you, Alexandra, were smart, you would have noticed such nuances. For example, which ones? There was one red carpet for Trump, another for Putin. Then Trump ignored Putin and left earlier without saying goodbye. When Putin was laying flowers at the monument, Trump's soldier wasn't there at all. Basically, Trump totally snubbed Putin, and Mikhail Ilyich noticed it. And honestly, no one else did. So I'm really curious, what was the point of Alaska? And actually, from your point of view, through the eyes of a million Weinsteins, what was going on there?
Well, honestly, I don't know what the point of Alaska was. I naively assume that since they're meeting now, they've agreed on something and they just need to show off a bit in front of the cameras. I suspect that Trump thought so too. And at the same time, the representative of the State Security Committee, Vladimir Vladimirovich, he absolutely didn't mean that what he said now actually had to be done. Because saying something is one thing, but doing it is another. I think that in the first 12 minutes, why 12 minutes? That's how much time it takes for two people. Unexpectedly for everyone, Putin and Trump ended up in Lebezin. So in those 12 minutes, basically, everything was clarified about who came, why they came, what they were planning to give up, and so on, etc. From Trump's perspective, they agreed on a set period, maybe a month, 3 weeks, or 2 months before that. I know how much. The cessation of armed, so to speak, conflicts, all of them. Always, so to speak. Trump tries to stop them first, to separate the hotheads, to cool things down a bit, and then to try to negotiate. So Trump, I think, believed that they would leave Alaska with this 30-day or however many day agreement. And he was absolutely furious when, in the limousine, it was explained to him that nothing of the sort had happened, and that Putin had just come to listen, to hear what they wanted to say to him. Well, everything else is easy to explain, but again, I wasn't there. I don't know what's in Putin's head. I don't know what's in Trump's head. I don't see any point. I didn't see any before, and I don't see any now in this meeting in Alaska. I just don't understand. There was an idea, maybe the one I mentioned or another. But I also heard the opposite version, the opposite of VERA. Namely, did you notice that Trump offered his hand to Putin with his palm up, back of the hand to the ground, and Putin placed his hand on top of his, and symbolically he dominated him? I think it was Gordon who said this on his channel, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe someone on his channel, someone was talking about it. It was definitely on a Ukrainian channel. Someone like Zhernov or someone else. One of those guys who aren't very smart, but because they once studied at the KGB school, they're incredibly respected for it. Now.
Listen, well, yeah, Leon, that's why I was asking you like that. There were a lot of other nuances mentioned too. And, well, I don't really remember everything about it anymore, but yeah.
I'm not sure. I just have to say one more thing. I really have to. If you think he's only telling you that if you were smarter, that's not true. He tells me that too. I made a deliberate decision while driving with 3 others and talking to him on speakerphone. After we finished, someone asked how I put up with that. I replied, that's just Veller. He means no harm.
That's 100%, because when? Then he says, Sashulia, well, that's absolutely right.
It's a joke about a snake and a turtle. Carry me across. You'll bite me. Are you crazy? They're going, and then in the middle of the stream, she bites her. The turtle starts to drown and says, what have you done, you fool? She says, I'm not a fool, I'm a snake.
Well, yeah, listen, I've already been asked to ask you some questions about the rates. I still want to continue what you were saying. After that, there were meetings. Again, many accused Trump of being friends with Putin. That Trump is giving in, that, in fact, so to speak, how is that even possible? And so on and so on. Is Trump really giving in? Is he giving in? And if I ask you, what is his relationship with Putin like today, and how is he trying to build it? That is to make them more or less workable so that he can continue doing something and not quarrel from the point of view of a politician and a diplomat. Or is he really giving in, acting so unclear, foolish, even a little dishonest, saying one thing and doing another?
Wow. First of all, to answer this question, I need to understand what giving in means, because I don't see any facts showing that Trump is giving in. I really don't see in what way he's giving in or what's happening that would make someone say he's giving in.
I'll tell you, yesterday we had Andrei Nikolaevich Lavionov with us, who named a few. For example, he said that Trump promised, let's say, 10 times, maybe he said 6, I don't remember. He mentioned exact numbers when Trump named the numbers, how much he needed to put Putin in his place or to solve this issue. Russia, Ukraine, 50 days, 30, 20, 10. And this will be it. But in reality, none of this happened. And he tries to sympathize with Putin more than with Zelensky. This wasn't said by Andrei Nikolaevich. I'm adding this myself.
Well, I don't think he sympathizes with Putin, and I'll explain why I think so, but I can definitely say that he doesn't sympathize with Zelensky. And Trump has every reason not to sympathize with Zelensky.
Why, Leon, right away, why?
Why? From Trump's point of view, Zelensky doesn't stand by his words. From Trump's point of view, Zelensky has deceived him several times. It all started back during the first term when he said that Giuliani flew to Ukraine to get materials from Shokin that everyone knew about. Crimes committed by a number of leading Democrats, including Biden, his son Kerry, his stepson Pelosi, her son, and so on in Ukraine. In response to this, there was actually strict surveillance of Giuliani. Wherever he went, the agencies followed him, warning people not to give him anything or tell him anything. And when Trump directly demanded, "Please provide the documentation," they told American citizens, "We will not interfere in your politics." And yet, in this way, they interfered in American politics. Then flying to the United States of America on the eve of the elections, traveling around and persuading people to vote for Trump's opponent, that's not quite right. From our point of view, this is called interference in our politics. The incredible theft that is happening during the war, happening in Ukraine, and which is clearly being covered up by someone at the top. We're unsure if Zelensky is in charge or being controlled, but someone is hiding the truth. We know all about this theft, including where the money is going. We just don't want to cause scandals. Twice I was contacted by, well, let's call it the CIA, but that's not exactly right. I worked on 2 documents I received from the CIA. Reports about the horrific theft of military equipment in Ukraine. Then it was sent to Africa on steamships that we transferred there and so on. But that's not really Zelensky. They steal. Yes, in Ukraine, everyone steals, yes, but if everyone steals, then you have to jail those who get caught. 2 major cases started with my involvement. They brought them to me, and I gave my response. And they ended with both of the people who were at the head of the huge embezzlement being transferred to other positions. 2 departments were ordered not to share information with Leon Ainsane. They didn't understand where I was getting the information from. They thought it came from Ukraine. It didn't come from Ukraine, it came from our own people. So that's how it was. 2 days after I did, the Wall Street Journal wrote the exact same thing. Everything matched. So besides that, Ukraine's constant voting against Israel annoys us. Subtitles. Ukraine has no right to defend itself. And what about Israel? How did they vote there? That we are the aggressor or something like that? A racist aggressor? Well, something like that, yeah. So Ukraine voted. Thank you very much. That's why we have a lot of complaints about Volodymyr Oleksandrovich. I really don't care what he wears to the White House. Absolutely don't care. Mao Zedong, Stalin, and others also wore similar uniforms. Now the new Chinese leader, well, not new, so to speak, Xi Jinping, he also dresses like Mao Zedong now and walks around like that. So what's it called? A frock coat, or so to speak, something like a French jacket. Yeah, well, I don't know. We have a very complicated relationship with Ukraine. We spend huge amounts of money on it. We practically keep it from being taken over at the expense of our taxpayers. And all we hear from Ukraine is constant whining that we're idiots, we're bastards, our president is a fool and an idiot, and he's Putin's puppet. This morning I released a show, I just couldn't help but do it yesterday. So I get a message from Gordon with his conversation with Zhirnov, the former intelligence officer Zhirnov and the former journalist Gordon. So they're talking about what a scoundrel Trump is, what an idiot he is, that he's a complete bastard. Absolutely 100%. Twice, Gordon asks Zhirnov, "Tell me, please, are you sure? Are you sure, yes, that he is?" He says that he's absolutely 100%. I'm an agent too, I know what they're talking about. So he's been recruited, he's acting, he's doing everything he's told, and then he speaks. 3 minutes later, he says Putin deceived Trump, meaning during the negotiations. But if Putin is commanding Trump and Trump does everything Putin wants, then why would Putin need to deceive Trump? At least try to have some logic in your behavior. Well, whatever. So, honestly, we have no reason to like the leadership of Ukraine. My grandfather was from Kharkov, and my other grandfather was from Pinsk, near Minsk. I have many relatives in both places. Of course, yes, I don't feel indifferent toward Ukraine. I don't want, as they say, for some bloody tyrant to take it over. But the way the leadership of Ukraine behaves, especially under guidance, I mean, any official I know anything about who doesn't do anything without taking a bribe. And this is during wartime. How do they profit? You pay to send it, and on the other end, it's helmets, vests, or something else. And they sell these helmets and vests. They sell them to their own soldiers. If you don't pay, you won't have a bulletproof vest. If you don't pay, you won't have a helmet. Go fight without it, even though it's right here. That's why naturally we can't have a normal attitude towards Zelensky. But he's a thief, or maybe an accomplice to thieves, while Putin is a murderer. That's the difference.
Leon, can I ask you questions? No problem. Do you find them different, Leon? Excuses for Trump. Don't you think that Trump betrayed Ukraine?
Would someone who was, let's say, on my side with me, but then quietly or maybe not so quietly turn the other way, be considered a traitor? What does Trump owe to Ukraine? What does America owe to Ukraine? Why, without any gratitude from Ukraine and Ukrainians, do we continue to help you survive? Continuation.
And one more question. Are the United States of America paying for the war? So do they need it for a reason?
And during this time, from one administration to another, especially when the legislative bodies change hands, our policy changes. Back in the day, at certain times, it didn't matter whether it was the Republicans or the Democrats. But because our Democratic Party has shifted to the side, both globalism and socialism are similar. Globalism is basically socialism in a more global form. Because of this, our politics is changing. And the war, or rather the annexation of Ukraine to Russia, was somehow needed by Biden's leadership, that is, the globalists, maybe in order to, say, we'll give you Ukraine, but you break away from China, for example, yeah. But for some reason at first, the United States, to put it mildly, was pushing Putin toward this war, and then, again, to put it mildly, they delayed sending weapons and the help they supposedly promised. Nothing was actually done, neither verbally nor in writing. And the Budapest Memorandum, if anyone brings it up now, they probably haven't read it. Why do I say this? A work of art, written so that no one owes anyone anything. Well, what I mean is, the West doesn't owe Ukraine anything, but Ukraine did its part. I think that a lot of money was personally received by someone who was, so to speak, at the head of Ukraine. At the time when Clinton really wanted Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons to Russia, so to speak. Well, again, he probably had good, maybe noble intentions, but after that he received a lot of money from the Russians. Clinton, for some reason, and his wife as well. So, without getting into all of this, for some reason Biden did nothing to stop the Russians. He could have. I think I've already said once that I can come up with 3, 5, even 7 options of what could have been done to prevent the Russians from invading Ukraine. But 3 years ago, nothing was done. On the contrary, it was said that if it was a quick special operation and not a prolonged war, then America wouldn't do anything. Putin immediately picked up on this and started calling the operation a special military operation. He immediately said that it was not a war. People were put in prison, literally put in prison, for saying war on the internet. In other words, they shut this down. People got scared, and now everyone is afraid. They started calling it a special military operation. Why? Because Biden said that we wouldn't intervene if it was a special military operation. Did they need this for a reason? Initially, they sent nothing to Ukraine, and Ukraine held back. Basically, mostly with their courage and the javelins that were sent there. Trump, at his time, was the only president of the United States of America who sent weapons that could stop Russian tanks in their advance. But then the Biden administration decided that it would not give Ukraine anything that could drive Russia out beyond its borders. They will provide everything so that both armies get bogged down and start killing each other. They weren't interested in Ukrainians, that's what interested them. Since we couldn't give Ukraine to Russia, we'll make sure that as many Russian soldiers, weapons, equipment, money, and so on as possible will explode and burn on Ukrainian territory.
Leon, thank you. Next, Trump urged European leaders not to buy oil from Russia since it helps Moscow. They say it finances the war in Ukraine. Macron said, after talking with Trump, that he is also imposing sanctions against Russia. Is this just a show or is it serious?
Let's break it down. First of all, as of today, Europe buys 3% of its oil from Russia, 3% of its oil from Russia. It's easy to give it up. In fact, most of it goes to two countries, Slovakia and Bengal. These 3%. Now what is being bought, what continues to be bought from Russia, is gas. But if earlier 45-50% of the market, 40-45, sorry for the numbers, was covered by Russia, then today I might be mistaken. But in my opinion, only 17% of Europe's needs are covered. At the same time, 15% is already covered by our American liquefied gas. That is, we are quietly switching Europe. But as we know, Russia has found where to sell its gas and oil at lower prices, under worse conditions and so on, but mainly to India and China, and Turkey, so to speak, a little bit as well. A little seems like a lot, but it's small compared to those two countries. So basically, Russia has found a way to redirect its hydrocarbons, send them in another direction, and survive that way. So right now, the main discussion isn't really about stopping the supply, let's say, of gas and oil to Europe, but about what we're going to do with those countries that, let's say, are preventing us from stopping the war. So look, something remarkable is happening. Trump says, I really want to stop this war, which I didn't start. I didn't participate in it. It's not my war, so to speak. I hate that people are being killed there and want to stop it. I'm ready to get into serious conflicts with huge countries like India, China, and so on in order to stop people from being killed in Ukraine. 1,000 people a day. Well, we know that 1 million have died in 3 years. Divide 1 million by 3 years, and you get 1,000 people a day. So the only person who needs this, why? Is it Trump? To stop this war. Everyone else is shouting, my God, what an idiot, what a bastard. What is he demanding from us? He's demanding that we stop killing people. What an idiot.
Yes, it's hard to argue with you, Leon. Congress in the United States has introduced, you probably heard, the draft defense budget for 2026. These are amendments that tighten military aid to Turkey. The reason is that Turkey supports Hamas and aggression against Israel, and several amendments directly prohibit it.
I apologize, but I'm not aware of it. I'm just not aware. It's completely out of my scope. I just don't know. Go on.
And that's kind of what I just said about Turkey and about the fact that this amendment and weapons are supporting Hamas and aggression against Israel. So that's all for today, right? Well, let me give you another example. You probably know that Mark Ruby has been negotiating with European countries to recognize the Palestinian state, right? And he said that this creates additional problems and there will be a reaction to it. What does it mean when the United States Secretary of State says there will be a response to this?
It means that he hasn't consulted with the president yet. That's what it means. He needs to respond somehow. He has some ideas, but he has to run them by the people he needs to consult with. A certain council, a group of people, including the president. Nothing else. We like some things and dislike others. That's normal. That's why other top state officials share their views too. Yes, by other top officials, I mean the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and so on. But Trump is unpredictable. It's not just him. There is also the course of politics. But how should one act tactically within this strategy? He is, of course, I'll say this word again, a brilliant man, so I think such things are tested on him first.
And one more question about the Americans. Stephen Withoff, the special envoy met, I think, yesterday in Paris with Qatari officials and discussed with them the prospect of resuming negotiations on the hostage deal. That's everything the Americans are doing today regarding the hostages and regarding support for Israel. And what's happening? It's absolutely clear that Donald Trump is trying to resolve this issue somehow. Yesterday, Israel Defense Forces representatives announced that they control 40% of the territory of Gaza City. Yesterday, representatives, how do you see the resolution of this situation with the support of the Americans?
Do you see? Oh. Well, the first answer, I don't know. Podung, it seems, because that's what it is. It's an insanely complicated question simply because there are so many different interests intertwined there, so to speak. And that's the problem. The biggest problem is that for 3 or 4 generations now, all the Arab countries around, the Muslim countries around Israel, they have all pursued a policy of propaganda against Israel. They have been stirring up what they call the street, yes, stirring up their street, in such a way that it's better to die than to give up even 1 meter of our Holy Land to these Jews. By our Holy Land, they mean anything they want, whatever they need to call it at that moment. The culture is so deeply rooted that mothers calmly give up their children to have them wear martyr belts and blow themselves up in crowds of Israelis. Because this is just so emotional. It's like Canada, and here comes Trump, ready to take us over, disrespecting us, so everyone rushed to vote for the Liberals. But if you stop and think, wait, these are still the Liberals. There are those who brought us into this situation. It's nobody, so to speak. Public opinion is always foolish. From my point of view, I used to say that 80% of people are idiots. Then I started saying that 98% of people are idiots. And now I've come to the conclusion at the age of 75 that 99.8% of people are absolute idiots. Thugs don't know how to think and aren't going to try, but for some reason they believe that just because they can remember that 2 times 2 is 4, they can now be called smart, and they can recall it quickly too. So, knowing that 99.8% of people, whether they're Arab, French, American, Russian, Ukrainian, or anyone else, are absolute, complete, total idiots, it's no surprise to me. Everything that's happening in Arab countries and so on, and in France and in Germany. By the way, right now in Germany, 7 political figures who were supposed to be elected from conservative parties were shot. Yes, 7 people in 2 days, someone just randomly killed them. So someone is controlling the people, someone is directing the people. And to solve the problem in Israel, I think these people need to be relocated somewhere else, to different places, clear out that territory, close it off, neutralize it, deal with the bombs, bury everything they've dug up and closed off there. Tens, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars that were given to them for development, they put it all into digging tunnels. Brilliant, right? Yes, they're given money to develop, to improve the lives of their people, and they built tunnels to kill as many Israelis as possible. Well, just great. So if they aren't evicted from there, then even if it's complete, so to speak, some of them might come back later. Without this, I can't see a normal life possible.
You know, I actually have a couple of questions I prepared for you, Len, but you just led me to another one. Right now, there's this rhetoric, which I think is completely stupid, as Mikhailovich Viller puts it. You know, it's everywhere now, this kind of thing. Yesterday, I spoke with a Ukrainian politician, Genry Balashov. We're planning to do something together. You hear a lot about this show from all sorts of sources now. Yes? They said, I already forgot who's supposed to take over, and the Jews want to evict Ukrainians from Ukraine and move there and take over Ukraine. Well, I've never heard such nonsense before, Len, never. I know you might say it's nonsense. I don't want to talk about it, but I still want to ask you, where did this come from? Did the Antichonists make this up? Well, what is this anyway? Where did it even come from? It's a nightmare.
Well, I remember very well how in 2007 or 2008, all of Russia was saying that Georgia attacked them. They were totally serious. I was in Moscow or nearby, but I can't remember exactly where. The person who was telling me that Georgia attacked, I asked him, by the way, do you know how many people live in Georgia? He had no idea. Back then, there wasn't an option to ask artificial intelligence right away, but I knew for sure. My wife is Georgian. I go there. I used to visit quite often. He says, well, I don't know, maybe 50 million or so. I say, no, I think it's less. He says, maybe 40. I say, even less. He says, how do you know? I say, I know the exact number. He says, so what's the number? I say, 4.2 million people. The guy sat there for a while, then says, so they attacked us. I say, are you crazy or something? See? People are such idiots that they don't even ask basic questions. That's how they are. Georgia attacked us. What should we do? We have to defend ourselves, right? Bring in tanks and stop exactly at 32 kilometers. I checked. It's 32 kilometers from Tbilisi's entrance sign to the Russian tanks, where their base is, though nobody invited them. That's it. Everything is the same, absolutely the same. Someone stirs things up, someone benefits, and someone has the money and skills to make it happen. Today, it's easy to sell any idea to anyone. We used to think that if a person had two different opinions, at least he would listen to both and then decide. 99.8% of the world's population won't do anything. Whatever they heard first is what stays in their heads, and then it's hard to change their minds. A personal tragedy needs to happen for them to change. Americans say that's when your paradigm shifts.
Thank you, Leon. Now, the question is this. Europe, from what we see and from what political analysts are saying, is ready to provide security guarantees to Ukraine. That's what Macron said yesterday. Although what Macron says, of course, no one takes it seriously, but there should be a summit, a so-called coalition of the willing. I think that's what it's called, and it should take place in Paris. And today, Zelensky, I listened to him this morning, said that you said that neither Ukraine nor Russia wants it to end.
The war.
I'm reflecting. Right now, yes. What Zelensky said that France, like other countries, wants to bring peace closer. Unfortunately, so far, we don't see any signals from Russia that they want to end it. And the representative of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, I think his name is Georgy Tiki, explained why Zelensky was once so eager to get real guarantees from the White House, the European Union, and security guarantees. And he showed the Budapest Memorandum of 1994, the terms of which were that Kyiv would give up nuclear weapons in exchange for security assurances from the United Kingdom, Russia, and the United States. And then there's talk about Zelensky wanting to meet with Putin. Putin suggests coming to Moscow. It all seems kind of outrageous. Who would go to Moscow? The hero city, as he said today, that's the situation. Leon, you said that Ukraine doesn't want the war to end. If they don't want it, then what? What does it mean? What Zelensky is talking about?
Well, if I say now that I'm an orangutan and I live in Africa, and you just think that there's a painting behind me, but actually it's the sea, yeah, would you believe me? Well, I guess you'd believe your own eyes. So what Zelensky says doesn't matter to me at all, and even less what a hired or paid person says, someone who talks about the Budapest memorandums. Someone claimed to guarantee something but didn't actually guarantee it. It's all written there. If someone attacks them, then those three parties will go to the United Nations Security Council to sort it out. That's all that's written there, so it's complete nonsense. So what Zelensky says, what Putin says, they will say whatever is needed at that moment from the perspective of international politics. Or maybe there are some other matters as well. Like Putin dragging something out. Why is he dragging it out? He still believes the longer he delays, the more land they'll seize. Zelensky hopes the longer they hold out, the less likely he is to be cut off. The citizens, after the war, when they start to figure things out, will wonder why he didn't fire a single person who was stealing food from their children and weapons from their soldiers. So that's the other side. From my point of view, they are doing everything possible to set conditions that the other side would not agree to. For example, to invite Zelensky to Moscow. Or, for example, to tell Putin that for there to be peace, all Russian soldiers must leave the territory of Ukraine, and then we'll talk to them. Well, yeah, that's some serious nonsense, right?
Well, yes. But Leon, when Putin invites Zelensky to Moscow, he knows that Zelensky won't go. When
Zelensky says to Putin, "You withdraw all your soldiers, and then we'll start negotiations about Ukraine's territory." Does he not understand that Putin won't withdraw them?
well, obviously,
He understands.
Leon, obviously.
He understands, but I will still come back. When he invites him to Moscow, he understands that he won't come.
For whom?
who is he saying this for then? For whom? That's what I'm interested in.
Well, it's so that inside their own country, everyone says, look, ours, it's not even that we're winning. And we defeated them, the fascists, and we've already beaten and captured the fascists and so on. And he says, he come to me and kiss my ring. But that little bastard, the comedian, the actor, and so on, he doesn't go. Well, now you understand that Ukraine doesn't want peace.
This is for internal use, as I understand it.
Yes, it's an exception, yes, but everyone understands that the rest of the world, I'm not talking about the riffraff right now. They know Zelensky won't go to Moscow, just as Putin won't go to Kyiv. Verona translated it, but he won't go. That's right.
Well, of course.
Of course. So will Putin withdraw the troops in order to start negotiations? From his point of view, he has a much stronger opposition than Ukraine does, so why would he stop? In his view, they are on the offensive, and it's beneficial for him to buy time. The more time he has, the more North Koreans he'll bring there, or maybe Chinese mercenaries. And now he plans to sell oil to Pakistan and India, and in return, he'll get mujahideen from them. And Ukraine is forced to take guys who are running away, who are being caught on the streets, and these are guys who studied at universities. They don't take the young ones, right? By the way, it's really amusing that these talking heads, these humanoid Russian-speaking people, they've sent all their own children abroad and got them certificates. For example, Gordon, he has, I think, 5 children, 2 daughters and 3 sons. I might be wrong about the daughters, but all 3 sons. All 3 of his sons are unfit for military service and have certificates. They left the country long ago and haven't returned. And he shouts, "We won't give up a single one, we won't give them up." Well, excuse me, it's not your own who are dying, it's someone else who is dying. Exactly, who couldn't afford a certificate? Again, I don't know, maybe his children really are sick. I don't want to judge, but it's kind of strange. All 3 sons are sick, none of them can, and they're all abroad. Well, it's strange.
Leon, since, so to speak, we started with the Canadian topic, I want to talk to you and come back to this at the end of our conversation. But is this what they sent you? Ask Leon. Leon. Recently, for a moment, the Ford company announced that it lost $800 billion due to tariffs on Canadian aluminum and asked Trump to remove this tariff. In short, tariffs are a destructive force. There's nothing genius about them except for robbery and blackmail. Tariffs are socialism. I meant the Ford company, which makes F-150 trucks. What does Leon think about this?
I have a huge request. While I'm answering, let this person send it. So, where did he teach economics, and what scientific works can I look at? In order to, well, let's say at least decide that he or she understands at least something about what they're writing. You know, since this has been explained many times, I'll try to do it the way my grandfather, who was Jewish, used to explain everything to me, with examples so that I could really understand. For example, if you're bitten by a snake, that's very bad if you don't get help. And if it's something like, I don't know, a Gurza or a cobra, then you'll most likely die. But if you take the venom from that same snake, dilute it 1,000 times or so, and make medicine out of it, then that medicine heals. When a bee stings you, it hurts. Sometimes it hurts a lot. But when bee venom is rubbed into aching joints, for some reason it starts to help those aching joints. If you've never studied economics, or if your knowledge of economics is at the level of a second-year student at an average university, or even a very good one, let's put it this way, you probably think that any snake venom will kill you. But if you've at least made it to your third year, you understand that when you use this together with a number of other substances, dilute it and turn it into medicine, it doesn't harm but actually helps. You know, it's impossible to explain something that's beyond their understanding to absolutely clueless, foolish people. Excuse me, I'm not saying the person who wrote this is foolish, but it's impossible to explain things to foolish people because they think you're lying. So what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah, like what you were just doing.
Yeah, I
Answered, or he's asking me. Alexander, ask Leon Weinstein if he saw the parade in China and that meeting, and what emotions he has about what's happening in China.
Well, first of all, I really don't like it when there's no competition. And I don't like it on the production level, on the level of art, on any level, and also on the political level. That's why I don't like a unipolar world, even though I like that, so to speak. The country I live in is at the head. But I can already see how over the past 50 years, even before the Soviet Union collapsed, and actually in recent years, how America, which was absolutely unpunished, so to speak. If a good czar rules, we do well. If a bad czar rules, we suffer. It shouldn't be this way. It's very bad when the world is unipolar because there's no competition, because there are no restraining forces. That's why I'm actually very much in favor of having another center, so to speak, a center of the world that competes. That's the first thing. Second, I don't understand the point of this formation. Now I'll say what I mean. When suppliers unite together against the market, against the place where they get all their income, there's nothing more foolish than that. Because if they really get to us, not like now. They didn't sign anything. Well, believe me, they didn't sign anything, except for condemning America for bombing Iran and saying that Afghanistan should be represented there somehow, to allow them to grow and do whatever they want. They didn't sign anything else. So this is an absolutely unclear alliance of 3.5 billion people, which isn't really an alliance at all. All right, they've presented the Union. Let's imagine that over the next 2 months they really did unite and started a struggle, as they write, against Western hegemony. Yes, the West says, oh really, TikTok, under the leadership of Trump, Macron, or another leader. We shut down our markets for them, to hell with it. Because over the next 3 or 4 years, Trump is building factories in America. Everything we need today, we can't break away from them. But we need 3 or 4 years to get to a situation where we don't need them, in which even if we need to import something from abroad, we'll import it from Vietnam, which has sworn us eternal, so to speak, love and so on and so forth. Yes, from the Philippines and from hundreds of other countries, and countries that dream of replacing China. We'll invest there, we'll help them. They'll start making the same cheap stuff that China does. And China, together with India and with Russia, will lose our markets forever, and they'll have to sell to themselves. And the person who works in a rice field in China I know this for sure because I've been there. Yes, when I went there, they earned $6 a day, and today it's 12. They've made big progress. 12 even multiplied by 30, though they don't have that many. That's not exactly the kind of money you can use to buy American cars, Japanese tractors, I don't know, or airplanes. It's a different kind of money. Half of China can't buy anything, so if goods are sent there instead of America, no one will buy them. And their standard of living will crash. That's why it's idiotic to unite suppliers without their own markets. And there are no markets there, in China, in Russia, or in India, because 60–70% of people can't afford purchases. In Russia, for example, they import $320 billion worth of goods. $270 billion worth of goods. Do you know how much is imported here? 3 trillion. There, it's a million. Tell me, $1 trillion worth of goods are imported into the United States of America, 12 times more. Well, how can the Russian market replace it, like India told us? We're now switching from the American to the Russian market. How can they replace the American market? That's complete nonsense.
Editor Aliona, last question. This is about Israel. I think you have more of a right to answer this one. You said, I was at war, I shot and was shot at. No further comments needed. Poor Palestinians, hungry and miserable. They've completely forgotten about the hostages who were taken by Hamas. October 7th is no longer mentioned either, but instead it's all about the hungry children, Gaza, and so on. Anastasia Kuznetsova, proofreader Samkin. We recently debated on Radio VERA. Andre Rudoy, who has his own channel, released a stream titled Israel, an Apartheid State. But we invited Ezra Moore, an Israeli blogger, and this Andre, so that these debates could take place. It was the first time I saw Ezra Moore lose his temper when he was having a debate here on our radio. With Shevchenko, with masterpieces like Maxim Leonardovich, he was so restrained, even though it was hard to stay calm with Shevchenko. But here, he lost it. I mean, Ezra just snapped. So I want to ask you, if I invited you to a debate with someone who called Israel an apartheid state, you lived in Israel, you fought in Israel, would you come and say, oh, go to hell, Sasha, with your suggestion?
No, why would I? I would ask him what he means and to provide specific facts, because just throwing accusations around, like Trump is an idiot, Israel is an apartheid state. You know, my own. Everyone has their own experience, right? That's my experience. So I actually served in the artillery troops and then was called up every year. So I arrive in America to stage a play in New York, at the Lincoln Center, so to speak, and rehearsals are underway. That's when the Lebanon operation begins. It was probably around 1980, maybe 82, 83, or 84. And, so to speak, we're all listening to the codes coming from Israel. There's a code, my regiment, for a call-up, meaning it's urgent. I drop, as they say, everything I can, and I couldn't get on the next plane because in Israel, only those in danger fly into the country, unlike many others who leave the country when there's danger, yeah. So finally, on the third or fourth plane they put me on, I fly and I arrive one day late. My regiment had left, but I was still drafted and spent a week guarding a women's dormitory with a rifle. You could say that this was a much more interesting job than fighting, but believe me, at that moment I would have dreamed of fighting instead. So, my guys, the Lebanon operation ended, the guys came back, and of course I rushed to meet them. These are all people I met with every year, all people my age, and every year we would go together for 2 or 3 weeks to these training camps and so on, and then they tell me that we were very close to. Why did the Lebanon operation happen? Because groups like Hezbollah were firing from there, so the area needed to be cleared. He says we go in with tanks, the tanks pass through, and we follow with cannons. Houses are there and people in them are shooting at us. Well, we uncovered the cannons and set them up. And usually you do this by targeting, but here you can do it with direct fire. He says we look and we can use direct fire. In every window they're shooting from, there are 2 children or 2 women, or a woman and a child, and between them there's a rifle or a machine gun set up, or something else like a howitzer or something, and they're shooting from there. So if you shoot back, you end up killing 2 children first, and only then do you get to the person who's actually there. Yeah. And that's the dilemma. So we were sitting and drinking in Israel. When I first arrived, nobody drank. By the time I left Israel, everyone was drinking. In 20 years, we taught Israel how to drink. We were sitting and drinking. Arak, which I hate, and it's warm. There's nothing worse than warm Arak in the desert when it's hot. But we talked about it and what to do. Yes, they tell us to shoot, that a Faust rocket is coming from there. That's a bazooka itself, so to speak. A jeep approaches and is hit by a bazooka, exploding with 2 officers and a girl inside. We must return fire, but there are 2 children present. What should we do? And now let everyone who is listening to this broadcast think about what they personally would do in this situation.
I want to say thank you, Leon. And I knew that I had to ask you this because for someone to answer me, they had to have been in Sakal and not just a theorist who would talk and make theoretical assumptions. I'll leave one question for you for next time, but I can't help but ask you now, even though we're running out of time. So, who was it? Ask your guest. Well, of course, your Jewish guest, you're a Jewish woman. I and you, we're kind of, Jews. You and I, kind of in a bad way. Leon, from the author's point of view, and who made the revolution in Russia? Exactly. Leave out the nicknames, and now you're blaming socialism. Ha ha. What did this godless world bring to Russia? Are you afraid to tell the truth? No, I'm not, but I, Leon, invite you to come. Thanks.
Of course, with great pleasure, because this question, in one form or another, is asked almost constantly. Well, look, so did we bring the revolution to Russia? No, we didn't. Another thing is that when the revolution came, a huge number of Jews were intelligent and educated. Perhaps not university educated, but educated in the shtetls. For them, an incredible opportunity arose. They were beaten, they were killed, there were pogroms, they were slaughtered, they were not allowed in, and they had hatred for the regime and the state that, so to speak, did all this to them. I mean Belarus, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, and so on. They all did the same thing. They looted, killed my ancestors, burned, killed, raped. They were unarmed, of course, and people would come, so to speak, and so on, and so on. So, hatred already existed. There was a desire for revenge. But that's not what led Jewish youth to the revolution and to the opportunity to break out of the shtetl and get their place in the sun. Moving on. Indeed, Jews ended up in leadership positions of this revolution in huge numbers. Well, let's think about something else. Why are you asking about this, and not asking about Jesus Christ, the man who started your religion? Yes, who was a true Jew? Moreover, he was a dissenter. In a sense, he was actually learned. What we call a rabbi today, that is a rav, who serves there. He simply had such an education. There were 12 apostles who followed him. All were Jews. Their wives were all Jewish. There wasn't a single one who wasn't. And all those you pray to are like, oh, Holy Mother of God, and so on. Think about who this Mother of God was, what nationality she was. Again, Jewish. Then, if you ever want to be cured of some serious illness, you have an 80% chance that your medicine or the device that will cure you was invented by a Jew. If you want to watch a movie and figure out who is acting in it, you'll find out that 80% of actors in the Western world at least are either Jews or openly Jewish or secretly Jewish, or their mother or their father or both, or converted, or something else. 80% plus 90% of writers and 95% of directors are Jewish. Except for black people, I think everyone is Jewish. Well, there might be 1 or 2 who don't seem to be Jewish, like, for example, Mikhalkov, he's definitely not Jewish, although his father told me that they had all sorts of connections. I mean, Sergei Seryozha, he told me that, well, there are some ties to Jewish blood in the family, that's what he told me. I didn't ask why. That's it. Nevertheless, that means 70% of Nobel Prizes in the last 100 years have gone to Jews. Only Nobel Peace Prizes are Nobel Prizes. They go to your people, to Yasser Arafat, to Obama, and so on. That's it. And all the rest go to us. So why are you so focused on just one revolution? Yeah, we've made a lot of revolutions, that's true. The only serious guy who's not Jewish is Newton. He's definitely not Jewish. But everyone who worked on it after him. The Great Industrial Revolution began with Newton, just so you know. After him, everyone advancing his ideas was Jewish. Every single one of them. And what's his name? Einstein. Yes, Einstein. Whose mistakes on the right I don't like. That's because of his political views. He was an absolute jerk in politics, but he was a genius. He had a Jewish mind. So there were a huge number of Jews, simply because we were oppressed for many thousands of years. And solidarity arises in a Jew with those who are oppressed, and he automatically wants to start helping them. And we do a lot of foolish things. We shouldn't have helped you with anything at all. And calmly left. But you don't want us to live in peace. You always want the Jews to leave so that this Jewess doesn't talk to this Jew. Yes, guys, you can say whatever words you want. We know perfectly well what you think. We have our own thoughts. And at the same time, we invent medicines. Or the phones that you all use to talk now. What, do you think that the phone you use to talk doesn't have it? 80% of what's in it was invented by Jews? Well, throw it away then, if you don't want to have anything to do with Jews.
Well, that's about whether you have the guts or not.
Thank you, Leon, and see you soon. With pleasure. Next time, please come when you have time and feel like it.
With pleasure, thank you.